So the ideal breath that we would use as our breathing pattern all the time would be smooth, even, which means the exhalation and the inhalation are about the same length. Nasal, through the nose, we're breathing through the nose, not through the mouth. And diaphragmatic. So the breath is smooth and even without any pauses, without any jerkiness. So let's talk about that first. So when we breathe in, sometimes we have a pattern of holding the breath at the top of the breath at the end of the inhalation before we breathe out. So if you notice that that's a pattern of yours, that you have this inhale, and then at the end of the inhalation you pause for a moment before you start to release the breath, and just see if you can pay attention to that transition point. And at the end of the inhalation, let it smooth and move into the exhalation. Now some of us have a pattern of at the end of the exhalation we pause for a moment before we breathe in again. So if that's the case, you would do the same. Just notice at the end of the exhalation, just let the inhalation start smoothly, finish the inhalation, let the exhalation start smoothly. And so the breath becomes this continuous wave or wheel. So we're just inhaling up, we're exhaling, releasing the breath, we're inhaling, we're releasing the breath. And so just let that continuous smooth breath pattern become something that starts to feel a little bit more normal to you. So if right now as you're paying attention to your breath, you notice that maybe it's up in the chest, there's a little bit more in the chest than in the belly, you notice that there's some jerkiness or holding in the breath, then all we do is simply start to pay attention to that. Relax the body, relax the chest, the belly, and then with this relaxation, the body's natural healthy rhythm can reestablish itself. So in all of the work that we do with the breath, it's really important not to get too strong or to be working with too much effort. We really want to just relax, pay attention to the pattern that's happening, and allow the breath to come back to equilibrium on its own. So that's one of the qualities that we're working with. If you have a lot of nasal congestion, or if you've developed a habit of breathing through the mouth, again, that's just something that you can start to pay attention to. There's alternate nostril breathing can help with some of that. The nasal wash can help with some of the congestion. So there's a lot of ways that we can work with that. And some of the resources around the nasal wash, the neti pot, sometimes people call it, can be found on my website, and they're widely available now. So you can learn how to do that. And so as you start to work with your nose and breathing through your nose, you'll notice that the inhalation feels a bit fresher and cooler. The exhalation feels a bit warmer, moister. And there's a lot of physiological reasons why it's really healthier to breathe through the nose than it is to be breathing through the mouth a lot. Lots of times when we're kids, we have a lot of congestion, and we develop a nose or a mouth breathing pattern. So it's really good to work with that in a kind of a conscious way and see if you can develop a pattern of breathing through your nostrils. Then another quality with the breath is diaphragmatic, and this is probably the more important one. So sometimes we develop a pattern of tension in the chest. Kids, babies and kids are usually breathing diaphragmatically, oftentimes by kindergarten, grade 1 even. People are starting to develop patterns of breathing in the chest, and that's often through tension in the body, through anxiety. And we can work with those patterns by relaxing the body and paying attention to the breath, and begin to breathe diaphragmatically again. So the diaphragm is this muscle that's attached to the lower ribs all the way around, separates the lower part of the torso from the lungs, and the upper part of the torso, the lungs and the heart. And it's a muscle, so if we haven't been using it very much because we've been breathing mostly in the chest or higher up in the chest, then it's a muscle that's going to take a little bit of practice with in order to get it functioning well and well toned. But the nice thing about working on diaphragmatic breathing is that as soon as we start to let the belly relax and let the breath come a little bit deeper, the body goes along with that. That's the natural way to breathe. The chest breathing and the anxious breathing is not a natural way to breathe. So the body's happy to come back into a more relaxed way of breathing. So when we start to work with this, the first thing is to not want everything to be different than it is. So if we have a pattern of chest breathing and we have a pattern of rapid breathing or lots of jerkiness or holding in the breath, then the way to work with that is to relax, bring our attention to it, and not to have it be a big deal. So we don't want to be working so strongly with the breath that we're getting anxious and we get a lot of constriction in the body. Just relax. These breathing patterns happened over a period of time, and it really doesn't take more than a month or two of paying attention to the breath to develop healthier breathing patterns. There's an exercise that we'll show you later called crocodile or makarasana, And that's a way to, you're lying on the floor on your front, and it's a way to establish diaphragmatic breath and to work with that. And there's also a lot of ways that we can work with it while you're lying on your back in Shavasana. So those exercises will be shown to you later on. So right now what we need to know is the diaphragm is kind of sticky a little bit with the lungs. So as we breathe out, the diaphragm kind of balloons up. And if you see the illustration, you see that it looks a little bit like a mushroom or an umbrella. And when you do that, the lungs empty of air, the exhalation happens. And then when you breathe in, there's this flattening of the diaphragm muscle. And so what happens is it flattens as it kind of drags the lungs with it. The lungs fill with air. So when we're breathing out, and there's a bit of a cavity formed when the diaphragm muscle comes up like that and forms that bit of an umbrella shape, the stomach and the other organs in that part of the body kind of move up underneath there. The reason that the stomach expands when we breathe in is because the diaphragm muscle flattens. That cavity is filled with the lungs and with the air, and so the stomach moves out a little bit. You can notice this more when you're lying on the floor on your back, but you can also even notice it when you're standing up. So if you're standing or sitting straight, you might notice as you breathe in that the stomach comes out a little bit, but also the lower rib cage expands a bit, and then it comes back in as you're breathing out. So you notice that there's a wave or an effect on the body of the breath as we're breathing in and we're breathing out. When we're breathing diaphragmatically, there's not very much of any movement in the upper part of the chest. More of the movement is actually around the lower rib cage and into the stomach area. So we have these qualities of smooth, so that just happens by relaxing. If there's tightness in the belly or contraction anywhere in the body, it's going to be a bit more of an effort to breathe. So the smoothness of the breath is just really a relaxation practice. And then we have the qualities of the evenness of the breath. So this is really, really important. So as we breathe out and as we breathe in, we want to have the exhalation and inhalation approximately the same length without any gaps or pauses in the breath. So as we breathe out, for instance, if we're breathing out to a count of 3, then when you breathe in, also breathe into a count of 3. And then as you breathe out, count of 3, breathe in, count of 3. So when we pay attention to that, what happens over time is we develop a habit of smooth, even breathing. And that is the healthiest way to breathe. It's the most relaxing way to breathe. And it's the part of the breath, the exhalation, the smoothness of the exhalation, is the part that really relaxes and heals our nervous system. So for instance, if we're working with anxiety, if anxiety is an issue for you, then you're going to want to work with the even breath first until you get that really well established, the smooth, even, equal length of exhalation and inhalation through the nose, diaphragmatic breath. And then you can also start to extend the exhalation a little bit so that you're actually breathing out up to twice as long as you're breathing in. So don't do that before you get the regular diaphragmatic breath established. But once you do, then that can be another way to really work with the anxiety levels in the body, bringing you to a new baseline of calm and relaxation and allow the nervous system to really heal. Now, if you have more of a problem on the other side with depression, low energy, fatigue, that type of thing, then you're going to want to always keep your exhalation and inhalation about the same length. You don't ever want to inhale longer than you exhale, but if you have depression, then you want to keep them about the same length. So learning how to work with the breath in this way, how to be kind of conscious of it, pay attention to it, is a really healing way, a really simple healing way that we can work with the whole nervous system. The body starts to relax, the mind relaxes, our tight grip on life starts to relax, and we can enjoy life better. We have this resource that we can go to anytime we like. You can do it when you're standing in line somewhere, you can do it when you're in the middle of an argument with somebody, you can do it before you go to bed at night, when you first wake up in the morning. The breath is always there with us, and we always have this opportunity to, number one, pay attention to the breath so we notice if there's a change in the breath, if there's some kind of emotional change that we need to pay attention to. But also, if we notice something's going on emotionally or we're getting kind of stirred up or stressed, then we can use the breath to calm ourselves down. So it's a real powerful way to breathe. And then physiologically, in the physical body, there's a lot of real benefits to working with the breath like this. So number one, the breath is supposed to be diaphragmatic. That's the way our bodies are designed, and that's the way they function the best. If we can start to breathe in this even pattern and then over time learn how to lengthen the breath, the ideal, the sweet spot for the breath is about 6 breaths a minute. And if you're breathing at about 6 breaths a minute, the nervous system actually has time to settle down on the exhalation. The parasympathetic nervous system has a chance to establish the relaxation response. We get that calming effect of the breath. But if we have a breathing pattern of 12 or 15 or 20 times a minute in the breath, then this nervous system really doesn't have a chance to learn how to relax, and we don't get that calming effect. So over time, don't stress out about trying to get the breath to 6 breaths a minute, but that's just something that we're working towards. And it will happen naturally as you learn how to work with the breath, establish that even pattern of the breath. If you don't have depression, then start to work with 2-to-1 breathing, and there's other breath exercises that we can work with as well. And then over time, you'll find that the breath just starts to lengthen on its own. There's relaxation in the body, and you have a new, calmer baseline. To summarize, the qualities of healthy breathing are smooth without any jerkiness or pauses or breaks, that it's even, the length of the exhalation and inhalation are of even length, that it's through the nostrils, not through the mouth, and that it's diaphragmatic, using the diaphragm muscle.